Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fangirl Fridays. Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Here on these installments, we will just be discussing a variety of things that we tend to fangirl about, whether it's anime, music, or whatever it is that we happen to be fangirling about at that time, or reminiscing about fangirling about. So here's your forewarning. There may or may not be spoilers within these podcasts when we are discussing these topics. So this is your warning. Listen at your own risk.
Most times we'll tell you the title of our little fangirl moment just so you have a heads up on whether or not you've seen or heard of it before. So you can try to skip ahead maybe and try to catch the next snippet if possible. We'll see if we can aid that as best as possible, but we're on a roll, so let's get into it.
Hey. So, on today's episode, we're going to be discussing throwbacks. Throwbacks back to the Toonami and Adult Swim times of different animations. In this particular case, animes or Japanese animations, Japanese, some people say Japanese cartoons. We'll be talking about the top around 6 that had the biggest impact on us, especially the more we actually look back and reflect on these anime of how exactly kind of either messed up or inspirational they really actually were. So yeah, like our first anime is a really big throwback and very dear to both of our hearts is InuYasha. Do you want to take that away?
I do. For those of you who have not seen InuYasha, it premiered on Toonami, I think when was it? The early 2000s on Cartoon Network. Came on in the evening time. Pardon me. No, it was not Toonami. It was Adult Swim because that was not a kids' anime in the slightest. There was cursing, there was violence, there was just a lot of angsty emotions in the storyline that I didn't exactly understand until I got older. But you know what drew me in? It was the dog ears. The dog ears were my favorite. I loved me some InuYasha dog ears.
We all just wanted to touch them, didn't we?
We just wanted to touch the ears. So for those of you who don't know, InuYasha is a comic as well as a animation by Rumiko Takahashi, which takes place in feudal era Japan with a half demon named InuYasha. He's a dog demon, so he has these cute little dog ears on the top of his head, long white hair, and a red hakori, which protects his body from harm because it's made of the fur of the fire rat. Now, InuYasha he's a little rough around the edges, but he meets a young high school girl, 14. Her name is Kagome Higurashi. She's in normal everyday Japan. I guess this would be the 90s at the time. And she happens to fall through the well that's in the back of her family home and is transported back in time to the feudal era through the Bone Eater's Well, where she meets InuYasha and they embark on adventures to put together the jewel shards of the Soul Eater's Jewel. And they get in all kinds of shenanigans, and it's full of demons and blood and war and guts, and I guess that gives you a little insight as to what type of teenager I was. Because I enjoyed the heck out of that. So tell me your experience.
It sounds a lot more gory. You're making it sound like extremely gory. It wasn't that gory. It had those fighting scenes where you were just questioning, like, okay, dang, he just like sliced into her stomach and all. But it wasn't as gory, let's say, like the live action zombie movies where people be decapitating people. You know, it wasn't that bad, but it has.
I mean, for a teenager, we're used to when most people think of anime, they think of stuff that's fun and cute, like Pokemon. But InuYasha was a far cry from Pokemon. Also, there was a lot of inappropriate moments of slight nudity and butt grabbing and slapping and all kinds of interesting themes. Like Inuyasha is full of tragedy. I'll say that. Like a lot of the storylines stem from tragedy, but the main idea is that the world isn't as horrible as it makes it out to be, no matter how dire everything seems. And I think that's the message that I got from Inuyasha, is that if you have people you care about, like your friends, who have a similar mission, even tragedy can bring people together. And if you trust in one another, you can achieve any goal you set your mind to, no matter how hopeless it may seem at the time. So Inuyasha was an anime of hope to me, as weird as it sounds, and I love the style of animation and the music, and it was one of my first glimpses into Japanese culture.
I can definitely relate for you. I can't help but just chuckle at the whole butt grabbing because Moroku. There. Okay, so this is how crazy Inuyasha was. They had a monk who had like this really. He was cursed with like a wind tunnel. So think of a black hole in the palm of your hand. So he had to keep it covered with like these specialized beads that kept it under control. And whenever he took it off the beads, that's when he just like sucked in everything into his hand. But he had a habit of being a womanizer to a sense where basically he was sexually assaulting women. Now that I think about it, freaking Moroku. He would like talk to women and then just randomly start groping their butts. And you're just like, what are you doing? And it's very problematic when you actually think about it. Like, what are you doing? His character was pretty funny. And like in the sequel, I can just touch on that later. It's just he's a very strange character, and now as a father and still a very strange character. But for like my take on Inuyasha, like of course I watched the other ones like Beyblade and Sailor Moon and Yu-Gi-Oh and like all those other classic shows. I used to be addicted to them every Sunday morning, or it was a Saturday morning on 4Kids TV. I'd be up in the morning watching my Yu-Gi-Oh and Beyblade. Yes, and all of those edited versions, which were problematic in itself. I'm like, yo, a whole season of Yu-Gi-Oh did not even come to America because they had a problem with it. That's a whole nother conversation. But Inuyasha was actually like my first pull into the world of anime, like the official pull, because I remember one day, it was during the summer, and I don't know why I remember it so vividly. It was during the summertime. It was late at night. I was in my room. I was bored. I couldn't sleep. And I remember watching TV, and it was the first time I've ever seen Adult Swim, because I think normally I would be asleep by that time, but for some reason I was up. And then it said like the little, up next, because I just changed the channel. I was like, up next is InuYasha. And it saw a clip of it. I think it was like a sword fighting scene between InuYasha and Sesshomaru. And I'm like, oh, this looks cool. All right, why not? I'll watch it. And I remember the episode. Oh my God, I do. So the episode that I first watched of Inuyasha was a Sesshomaru based episode. And it was toward the beginning where he was getting Tenseiga. No. Not when he's getting Tenseiga. It was when he was trying to get no, it was a new sword. He tried to get a new sword. Something for it was the little goblin demon who was supposed to force that sword for him, that he was going to be able to.
Was it Tokijin?
Yes, Tokijin. It was Tokijin's episode. And I remember it was either when he killed Tokijin or like he sliced somebody and he had a fake arm or something at the time. Like I see bits and pieces, I can't remember it as well, but I remember seeing Sesshomaru. I was like, oh, he cute, I want to watch this show. that was my thought process. I was in 5th grade. Okay, I was in 5th grade. God. I thought this character was attractive as hell, and I was like, yo, I want to watch this. And from there I just got hooked, and I was just watching. And then the end theme song came on that everyone knows, like
oh my gosh, Fukai Mori.
Yo, that if you talk to any anime fan, they know the Fukai Mori. They know that song. All you gotta say is,
oh my gosh. When I tell you, Fukai Mori was the inspiration for me to learn how to play the guitar.
Ooh, girl.
That was the sole reason. I begged my mom to buy me a guitar just so I could play that song. I still have that guitar. I still have not learned how to play it, but that song stuck with me. And you know what the craziest part is? I prided myself on my little Walkman. I would record from the TV the InuYasha ending theme so I can use them as ringtones.
Yo, me too.
Because I didn't know where else to get them.
Too.
Like, I don't have money to buy like the whole album, and it took me forever to figure out the name of the darn songs. So like, it was the craziest thing. Oh my gosh. Yep, the struggle life. Struggle life.
It really was a struggle. And it's funny because when I was watching at the time, it was just, I was obsessed with the story, just watching all of the characters. I almost said Naruto. Naraku pissed me off because he just wouldn't die. Like for those of you who do not know, Naraku is the villain of the series, and they spend the entire over a couple hundred episodes trying to kill this fool, and he just won't die. And they got to the point where it was so drawn out in the original series that, here's a spoiler alert, in the original series, they're just ending it with, well, thank you for joining us on our adventure to fight and kill Naraku, but we're going to keep going, but thank you for joining us. And I was like, WTF? Like huh? Seriously? We're going to be doing that right now? Like, what is this? And it took them another couple years. I think it's because the manga kept going on and they just ran out of content. I don't know why, but they did. And they just ended it like that. And it wasn't for another couple years when they came out with the final act, which was actually the best out of the entire freaking series, where it was slightly new animation. And they actually, they condensed the end of the manga into like 26 episodes, final act, I think part 1 and part 2. And it was the best by far because you got to see the characters in a more like mature light. And yo, when Sesshomaru, when he had his moment with Rin, I was like, yo, you care. Aw, you care. Because he's just a very stoic character that just hates humans, but he has this little girl that he protects. And spoiler, she dies a couple times and he tries to save her and bring her back. And one time he literally has to go into the depths of hell to save her and rescue her. I'm like, oh, look at you, Seshi. You claiming you don't like humans and you don't like people, but you saving a little girl, which is problematic in the next series. I was
about to say,
I don't know if we should go into that, but just a side note, they recently, within the last year, they brought back a sequel to InuYasha, and it has to do with the original characters are now grown up. They are in relationships and they have children, and it's slightly problematic. But it, like, on one hand, if you think about the time period, it makes sense. Because back in that day, people didn't live that long. So once a girl got her period, she was considered marriageable age and childbearing age. So it makes sense from a time period standpoint, but from our time standpoint, it's kind of like cringy.
Yeah, and not to mention, chronologically, Sesshomaru is supposed to be like in his 300s or something. So for him, it doesn't make much sense to be like waiting around forever, because he's kind of like, you know what, these humans have like these short lifespans. I might as well make do with the time I have, kind of stuff. Oh boy.
That's a whole nother conversation when we could talk about how y'all feel about that. But overall, I think InuYasha was a very big turning point for a lot of us original, like, OG fans. And it's becoming more popular nowadays with like Attack on Titan, and the fact that what I love, Meg the Stallion is a total anime fan. She's a total anime nerd. She just like posted about Yu Hakusho having the best opening. I'm just like, heck yeah, we can talk about that another time. But the fact that anime is generating more popularity, but for us OGs, we're kind of like, I think InuYasha was definitely one of the original anime that really had an impact on a majority of us, though it wasn't until I became an adult that when I started going back and watching and analyzing the characters, like mentally and psychologically, is kind of like, it's fascinating how much more of an impact these classic shows can have on us in terms of watching it as a kid with not enough life experiences versus now going back and rewatching as an adult. You notice things you didn't notice before. You can recognize characters' personalities more. You can see, oh, are they growing or are they stagnant? Like, why are they doing this? And it's very fascinating to see, especially like InuYasha, the main character. You just see him as like an angry kid who's always just yelling at everybody. But the more you look at it, like, he's just super insecure. Like his older brother tries to kill him all the time. His mother died. He was left to fend for himself. And the woman he loved, the only woman he actually fell in love with, like, he thought she killed him. and he's betrayed, he's hurt, and he's like a little puppy. Doesn't excuse his behavior and his like lashing out, but you can start understanding why he behaves the way he does in some of the other characters as well. So it's a very fascinating, I think, animation that recommend if you want to start with the OGs.
Speaking of that, back when I was in high school, I had my standard lineup of InuYasha characters that I resonated very deeply with, and I had my favorites. So InuYasha obviously was my favorite, but I didn't like Kagome. I could not stand Kagome at all.
I don't think anyone could stand Kagome.
I thought she was whiny. I thought she was just too quick to anger. I thought that she was pretty useless for a good chunk of the show. And like I really wished we could have done without her. I really like Sango, the Demon Slayer. That was like my soul speaking right there. And despite her traumas, she was still, in my eyes, a very strong and powerful female character. Oh boy. But as I got older, I started to reevaluate my perspective of these characters, specifically Kagome, and I developed a stronger appreciation for what she brought to the team. Yes, she was the only, I guess, lower status human in that when you got a half demon, a spiritual monk, a fox demon child, and a demon slayer that's been training all her life for generations of knowledge behind her, you've got this kid from the future who is really only magical because she harbors part of the soul of her reincarnated powerful priestess twin in her. And I started to appreciate her a little more because she came into her own power. Even when she lost those bits of her that were connected to Kikyo initially, she managed to establish her own identity in a world that really wasn't made for her. She made an effort to get to know InuYasha and still care for him despite his gruff exterior and all the hardship that he put her through with his trauma. And she found her own power through kindness and the willingness to understand other people who are in pain. And it resonated a lot more with me as I got older because initially I really hated her. I didn't like the prospect of having the damsel in distress, the girl who was constantly angry but could do nothing about it. Sango, on the other hand, was severely traumatized, and her trauma manifested in this overcompensation of strength through physical aggression. Like, she never really came to terms with the death of her parents or her brother's very scary predicament. And it wasn't until she was allowed to be feminine and allowed to be herself around her friends who cared for her was she able to drop that hardened exterior of trauma and begin to actually come into her own also. So it was a very interesting realization on my part for how I resonated with these characters and a complete 180 in my perspective of a show that I loved growing up.
Oh, 100%. I think especially what you made a very good point about Kokome, who's the lead protagonist. I think a lot of people, and it was especially myself as well, like I found her to be the most annoying character. It's always like, InuYasha, Kokome, InuYasha. It was always just her yelling. And then it's like, sit boy, and always angry. But and like you said, like always needing to be rescued and just seeming to be a very useless character. Not gonna lie, in elementary school, one of my old girlfriends, we haven't talked in years, but she used to write a lot of fan fiction. And I remember she wrote a fan fiction specifically where she pushed Kagome off a cliff. I don't condone that, but I just remember that because she hated Kagome so much and she was in love with the InuYasha character. So she's like, hey, now I can get him. I'm like, oh my God, that's murder. But as like what you did, I reevaluate Kagome looking back now of how strong of a person she really was at such a young age. Like going from like basically the 20th century, 21st century into a world where there's demons trying to kill you all the time. You've never had self-defense classes. You don't know how to protect yourself. That's, of course, you're going to be stumbling around. I'm like, girl, my behind will probably be running the other dang way. Well, I'm like,
y'all can find shards on your own. Good luck.
Yes. Well, if you were in trouble, I'd try to help you. I'd probably die within 2 seconds, but I would try, but.
And that's exactly what she did. She would try.
She tried, and that's more than I can say for like a lot of people, like she was put in a difficult predicament, and she's a lot stronger than we give credit. And of course, she's a very vocal young woman. And many times women are taught, like we are taught inherently through society, we're not supposed to be vocal. We're not supposed to be yelling out or being angry and aggressive because it's taken as a negative light. And I think this is the prime example of how we all hated her because she was so loud, because she was so seemingly angry, when in actuality, she was just vocalizing herself and be like, listen, no, we gotta get things going. We gotta figure out what's going on. And with InuYasha, with his little stubborn behind, someone had to put him in his place and be like, listen, Hunty, this ain't that. But highly recommend.
Lord have mercy.
Should we jump to the next anime?
Yes. Let's
yes. Moving forward, that was a really great one. The next one that we wanted to jump into was Ouran High School Host Club. And this is an anime by Bisco Hattori. And let me tell you, it's another classic opening. It was like, kiss, kiss, fall in love. Maybe you're my love. Okay, I won't go into the whole one because I would be jamming. I remember the words. It's a shame. But it's essentially what Ouran High School Host Club is about. Is essentially about a young girl named Haruhi, and she's from a more poor side of the community, can't really afford too much, but she winds up getting a scholarship and getting accepted into this highly elite boarding school, or Ouran High School, a very elite school. And she doesn't really wear the school uniform. She doesn't really adhere to the gender norms. She's just like, as long as I'm comfortable, I'm fine. I don't care. She has shortcut hair and baggy clothing. So when people first look at her, they just think she's a boy. And she doesn't care because she's minding her business. She's studying. And one day she winds up trying to find a place to study inside the high school when she's first admitted to it, and she stumbles upon this room full of all these pretty boys in like very well kept uniforms, and they're like, welcome to our host club, blah 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 blah. And she's freaked out because these guys are trying to serenade her in a way of like, hey, come in, and what type of guy do you like, and you can buy our time, and blah blah blah. And she's like, what the heck is wrong with these people? And she winds up knocking over a very expensive vase by accident, and it breaks, and she's like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I'll pay for it. And they're like, that costs over like $1 million. And she's like, oh my god. So they're like, all right, well, you're gonna serve us with your body, you're gonna be our like pretty much our lackey until you pay off that vase. So she ends up inadvertently joining this host club because they don't realize that she's a girl right away. And then she has to kind of pretend to be a boy until she pays off her dues and becomes a member of the host club. And it's a lot of hilarious shenanigans that she goes through. And let me tell you, very rarely do I find anime that makes me laugh, like the ugly laugh of almost snorting. This show will have you cracking up, it'll have you laughing, it'll have you crying. It's just one of those feel good classics that you are just like, yo, this when you're upset, watch this anime, it'll have you happy within like 10 minutes. But yeah, it's overall like it's a very fascinating concept that kind of really challenges the gender norms, because normally anime, you always see girls with like the short skirts and big boobs and always adhering to like the damsel in distress call, whatever, in anime. But in here you have a strong female, she's taking care of herself, she's going to school, getting an education, she doesn't care about the boys, she doesn't care about the romance, she's like, I'm doing my job, I'm here, and I don't need the romance, I'm doing my thing. And I find that to be very, very wonderful message. Like at the time when I first watched it, it didn't really click, but I knew I just loved watching it. But now as an adult, I'm like, I loved the concept, and I definitely want to go back and actually read the manga because the anime didn't touch too deeply. But yeah, like, what are your thoughts about that?
So I heard about Ouran High School when I was in high school. A lot of my friends were reading it, and I had no idea what the appeal was because I didn't really understand. Do you think Ouran High School would be considered a harem anime?
Yeah, it's actually considered a reverse harem because the normal harem will be like the one guy and a bunch of women characters who vie for his attention. But Ouran is considered the reverse harem because there's one girl and one, two, three, four, five, six guys. Six guys. So reverse harem.
So that's why I went to an all-girls high school. So that was like the big thing for a lot of girls in my grade. And they're like, oh my God, Ouran High School is such a great thing. It's the best thing ever. And I didn't know what the heck they were talking about. Because of course I was still stuck in my InuYasha phase. So I'm like, I don't know what this is about. This is kind of weird. What are you guys talking about? And it never captured my attention at that time. But the more I would see snippets of it when I would go to anime conventions, I would walk into some of the viewing rooms and then they would be playing Ouran High School. So I sat in on an episode or two and I'm like, this is actually kind of funny. Like, I like this. This is hilarious. And like it appealed to me because of how lighthearted it was. Now I tend to dabble in some of the heavier anime where it just really dives into like the nitty-gritty psychological horror or the violence of the world around us or like hardcore romance or tragedy. And that just seems to be the kind of story that I gravitate toward. But Ouran High School really caught my attention because I'm kind of like, this is just like I guess, would that be considered like a slice of life anime? Where it's just very simple and fun and just about kind of coming of age.
Yeah, so according to the genre list, it says like harem and romantic comedy, but I can definitely see it being like a slice of life because it does talk about like parental loss and coming into your maturity. The guy is changing their perspective because they're from super, super rich families and they're like commoners coffee because she bought them instant coffee when they sent her out to go get some coffee. They're expecting like $300 coffee beans. And she's like, hey, here's instant coffee. Just add water. And Tamaki, the lead guy, is just like, oh, is this the infamous commoners coffee? I will be brave and I shall try this commoner's coffee. And you see like another girl who's watching. She's like, oh, my daddy I would get in so much trouble with daddy if I ever tried the commoner's coffee. And Tamaki's like, but what if I gave it to you through my mouth?
And it's like,
and it was just, yeah, it's like, what? And she's like, oh, okay, I'll try it. And I'm just like, wait, Tamaki, you need to stop. Like, what are you doing?
And it's funny because I guess it really does highlight the classism that comes with I've noticed that there's a theme in like anime where you do have this elitist culture, and especially when it comes to like academics, you have like the ace student or the class rep or the most popular kid in the school, the high athlete, the smartest kid, and it's like these are essentially considered to be celebrities in their world. So if you're anyone who doesn't, I guess, measure up to that ideal, you are not considered worthy of their time or worthy of their attention or friendship even. So I can completely understand how Ouran High School is such a paradigm shift for people who would probably find themselves as maybe someone who drinks commoner's coffee because, you know, that's what they grew up drinking. And, you know, to be belittled for enjoying something simple is bad juju, no bueno. We don't like that.
I love it though, because it's also a way to kind of demonstrate we're all human, we're all people, we just have different life experiences. And once we establish, I can't English anymore. Once we like establish that we're all the same people, we just might, one person might have more money than the other. That's perfectly okay. But at the end of the day, we all have heart. And it takes that empathy to be able to connect with other people. And I love, especially because Haruhi's father is a cross-dresser. And I found that to be amazing, that like her father dresses like a woman. And it wasn't put in a obviously there's comedic moments, but it wasn't put in a way to just make fun of those who do enjoy cross-dressing, from male to women cross-dressing. It was put as a way, it was just a way of life for him. And he was trying to compensate also for the fact that she lost her mother very young. So he was trying to be the dad and the mother at the same time. And it was very interesting seeing his psychological development of trying to be overprotective dad, because once the boys came around and he saw that she was hanging out with them, that's when his father, his more masculine energy came out. It's like, you're talking to my daughter. And then the femininity came out in other ways as well, when he would be like, oh, why aren't you dressing more girly? Oh my gosh, here's a pretty dress for you, and this, that, and the third. So it was interesting seeing that dynamic, but also seeing that introduced in a more like a normalized way. Like, yeah, this is my dad. Yeah, he just dresses like a woman, so what of it? Whereas the others were just completely taken aback by this. She was able to introduce to them some other commonalities to kind of ground them and to help them see that their bubble of wealth isn't all there is to the world, and that there's so much more that the world and life has to offer, like genuine connections and love and friendships are worth more than money. So I really would definitely recommend this animation to those beginners. Like this and InuYasha are both amazing starters and classics, and pretty much almost any OG anime lover from back in the 2000s and the 90s are going to tell you they've probably seen this anime.
Mhm.
Well, I'm gonna probably watch this when we're done. I'm not gonna lie.
I understand. I might watch it too. Shoot.
Girl, you better, and then we can talk about this some more.
Yeah.
But the most problematic one, I
Oh,
think that we have a
Lord.
lot of tea to go into on this, would be Chobits.
Oh boy.
Chobits, which was collectively made by the Clamp Manga Collective.
They're
So,
problematic in their own right.
girl, do you want to go into that?
We're gonna go in. So, Chobits. Chobits is basically it's an anime and a manga series by Clamp, which features a young man named Hideki who is trying to get into or pass his college entrance exam. He's from a rural town and he keeps failing his college entrance exams. So he moves to the big city because the next time he can take the exam is within the next year. So he goes to cram school and he tries to get a part-time job to pay for his apartment that he's living in. And while he's there, mind you, he's living off of scraps. He doesn't really have much of an income and he's got to study all the time. So one day when he's coming home from his part-time job, he finds an abandoned person com in the trash can. Now, a person com in this world is an android computer in the shape of a human, and they can come in any shape and size. But the way you can tell that they're person comms is by these big ears that they have on the sides of their head, and their eyes. Their eyes are very kind of glazed over and not human-like. That's really the only distinguishing feature. So, of course, he initially thinks he's found a body that was tossed in the trash, and he freaks the heck out. But then he notices the ears, and he's like, "Oh no, this is one of those person com things I've seen like in the store windows." Now, mind you, those things go for thousands and thousands of dollars, so he knows he can't afford one of these. But oh Lord, basically, he manages to he takes it back to his apartment. Uh, mind you, it's wrapped up. It's wrapped up in a cloth and everything. It's heavier than it looks. He carries it to his apartment. He puts it on the floor and he, examines it to try to see if he can turn it on. And this show is very on the nose because he figures out that the best way to turn it on is to insert his fingers into her private space and push a button.
The no-no box.
The no-no box, which brings her back to life. And she's damaged, so the only thing she can say is, Chi. And that's what he starts calling her, Chi, because that's the only thing she can say. And she's basically a child. And so he spends pretty much the rest of the series trying to teach her how to communicate and how to interact with the rest of the world, and clothes her and everything. And it's kind of weird because he doesn't know what to do, and everybody else is kind of like, wow, you got a person com, cool. And and it just turned, if you watch the show, you'll see all the surprises and the magic it has to offer. But I'm here to talk about how problematic the imagery here is with this college-aged man and this humanoid android creature that he essentially adopts. And she's childlike, but perpetuated very erotically, I'll say, because there was a lot of comedic moments that involve nudity, where maybe she'll have a nip slip and not really know that she's nip slipping, and he freaks out because, of course, he's actually attracted to her, but keeps telling himself he can't be because she's not really human. So this show actually does an introspective dive into what makes someone human. Um, it's a very compelling look about humanity and our ability to connect with one another and what we really need. So it actually comes at a very good time where Cyberpunk 2077 is now really big. This could be seen as maybe like a precursor to the cyberpunk age. So, what do you think about that?
I feel like it's just I'm just cracking up inside as you're talking about it, because I'm just getting image flashbacks of the episodes, and especially the first episode where he's just like freaking out. He had just brought the body of the robot into the apartment, and he kept trying to figure out how to turn it on, and it emphasized like he tried everywhere, like pushing her nose, pushing in her ears, pushing on her mouth, and even like he's like even these, and accentuated her breasts. He's like, I tried squeezing them and she didn't turn on. And he's like, oh well, I tried pushing every button I can find or push everything I can, but where can I go? And he's like, oh no, it couldn't be, no, that's just too weird. And then he's just like, fine, I'm just gonna go for it. And he just like 1, 2, 3, ooh. And you hear the clicking sound, and it's very dramatic, and she turns on and she's like, I'm alive. So it was like, when I think about it, I should not have been watching this at the age I was. I mean, neither of us. But it's fascinating because, as you talked about, it dives into the genuine connection, because she obviously she isn't the average robotic persicom, because she has like, not trying to spoil anything, but there's something different about her where she's more humanoid and she has the capacity to feel, whereas other robots obviously are just they're just computers. But there's something special about her where she can actually contract emotion, she can feel different things. And it's fascinating because I like how her on button is also her off button. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of saying that you have to have a type of platonic friendship or connection or romance, because if you have sex with this thing, she's going to turn off and it's going to ruin like the system and whatnot. So I found that to be very fascinating, how strategically the creator of Chi placed that button. I thought that's kind of really funny, an ironic place to put it, because it is a woman who created Chi. So I found that actually to be extra hilarious. And then throughout the series, like was like when she had to try and find panties, and he was freaking out about that. He's like, oh my God, how do I get her panties? And
so
he's
embarrassing just for him. Like, you know, as a man going into, and also like, you know, in Japanese anime, that's a common theme too. Men aren't supposed to be in spaces where women are, because you're immediately accused of being a pervert, even if you have the best intentions. So with him, you know, he's trying to find clothing for her because she's wearing his stuff for a good chunk of the time. And everybody's like, what the hell is wrong with, like, what is she wearing? What are you doing? So like, he's never navigated the side of like the female anatomy and what her needs are and appropriate clothing. And so like, he's so awkward in his portrayal. And I think that's a very good kind of narrative for how oblivious we are to interacting with one another in our own realms. Like, most women don't know what it's like to be a man and how to interact with men and what their struggles are, as vice versa. So with him, it was so strange. So strange.
Very strange, but also it definitely showed like how men, obviously not a lot of men tend to be this awkward when it comes to hitting puberty, but it gives a good insight to how, if men aren't, or young men in this case, are not introduced properly, or they haven't been around many women, like how uncomfortable it can be, especially with their hormones going crazy. And because he kept getting nosebleeds all the damn time because of Chi, because she would do stuff, because like was mentioned earlier, she's a robot, but she's so humanoid. Like, she has bigger breasts, she has a small petite figure, and since she doesn't know like boundaries, because she's basically an infant, She has no modesty. So she'll like lift up her dress at one point, be like, oh, what's this? And he's like, no, put it down. And he'll get nosebleed. Or like she'll tackle him because she sees him basically as her caretaker, kind of like a puppy. And she'll just tackle him on the floor. And like, obviously her breast will press up against him and he'll get a nosebleed because he'll be like, oh my God. Oh, they feel so real.
I feel them.
I feel them. Because I think it's also his first interaction with a woman, even if she's not a legitimate woman. It's still like, think of silicone, you know, like it feels skin like, so it's kind of tricking his brain. And it also kind of dives into how with even though this came out years ago, it's kind of foreshadowing how as time goes on, people are starting to rely more on robotic connection. Like there are conventions for those of you who do not know, and this is where I get a little bit adult at the moment, they actually do have conventions for sex robots where people can buy a robotic companion and have sex with them. And it feels like human skin, and they even program them to have different personalities based on what you want. If you want a more demure personality, you can program that. If you want to switch it to a more fierce one, you can program that. And you can design how they want to look, what race, how big the eyes, what color the eyes, what kind of lips, what kind of this, what kind of that. You can design your own robotic companion. And there's even a hotel in Japan that's completely run by robots. It's really cool. They actually have a T-Rex. That's one of the hotel people. It's a T-Rex and I love it. I want to go to that hotel, but that's total side note. But yeah, like it foreshadows how humans are like really going forward. And I know Japan recently came out with they did a life-size Gundam, robotic Gundam that can move and stuff. And pretty soon, that thing is gonna be walking around just like the anime. I swear to you. But it's gonna be scary. I'm like, let me go hide somewhere. But no, let me be your friend. So I know if things go down, you got me, friend. But it just dives into this how humans, we need our connection, but we try to turn that to like a more safer way so we don't get hurt. So it's like when you interact with another human, there's always that 50-50 chance that this person might be trash for you and might try to hurt you. But when you turn that emotion, that connection to something robotic and something that you have a for sure thing where you know, okay, I can program this character and I know they're not going to hurt me. It becomes that safety net where you don't even need human connection anymore because you have this thing that's fulfilling your every need and it becomes an addiction. I think there was actually a TV series called like My Strange Addiction. And like some dude was in love with his car. I think another one was in love with his sex doll and it wasn't even robotic. So I think that this show really emphasizes how we can, the avoidant patterns that a lot of us humans have because we just don't want to get hurt. We want to have that security of someone loving us. Like, what do you think about that?
Yes. And one that actually reminds me of one of the characters named, what's his name? Minoru.
Yes, Minoru with Momo Sumomo, right?
Yeah, no, Shimbo is the one with Sumomo, his little tiny person who's basically like a laptop. She's adorable. Oh,
yes.
But Minoru is the 12-year-old prodigy who fields the custom person like designs. And he actually has a person called Yuzuki, who is built specifically to resemble his deceased older sister that he loved very dearly. And he actually downloaded his sister's personality into the person because he missed her so much and he just enjoyed her presence. He knows, obviously, he's a prodigy. He knows in his mind that that's not his older sister and that his older sister is gone. But in his heart, he's comforted by the presence of this person who looks just like her. And there are different stories throughout the series that represent the emotional attachment that humans place on their person for various reasons. It's definitely more substantial than just like a sexual relationship or like a control. It's steeped in the emotional vulnerability that humans have and our need for connection, like we were saying before. And it kind of reminds me of a Black Mirror episode. Spoiler alert, I love Black Mirror, but there was an episode where a woman lost her husband. They just got married, they moved into a new house. He went for a drive and he died. Her friend told her while she was mourning about this program where she could talk to. It could take memories from like her photos and her videos and pretty much all the bits of his personality that she's accumulated through media and create a file for him. It could replicate his voice, so she could actually talk to him. It could replicate his memories and his personality so that when they had conversations, he would respond in a pretty similar way as he would if he were alive. And it got to the point where they actually sent her a android body where she could download everything that she'd created and put it into the body, and then he would be reborn in this body. It's still not him, mind you, but it's as close as possible. And like it disturbed her so bad. Like it killed her inside. Because mind you, she was pregnant at the time. Like he died, you know, right shortly after she'd gotten pregnant. So she she wanted to make the choice to kind of get rid of it because she knew that it wasn't him, and it was such a it was just so confusing for her. But she couldn't let him go. So she kept him in the attic, raised her son, their son, but kept him in the attic as like kind of an emotional support thing. And I feel like that's the role that person comms were playing in this show too, is that if we can't have what we want, we're going to create something to simulate that.
Ooh, that's scary. Look, just hearing that just gives me chills. Like, I, it's so hard to like, obviously, like death is hard. Death is an extremely difficult thing to handle for anyone, especially if it's a lover, especially if it's like a sibling, someone who's close to you. It's a very difficult thing. So I can understand why people would want to go through these lengths to keep them around. Like there's people who have like who keep the ashes of their loved ones, or personally, I have a necklace from a family member with some of their ashes inside. And like other people have tattoos of that person because we want to remember them. You know what I mean? So it's fascinating. Like kind of like circling back with Minoru and his sister replica. It's interesting because his sister actually had different color hair. So what I think what he did was he created enough of a likeness to her so that way he can have that familiar feeling, but he changed her just enough so that way he can keep that differentiation between my sister is dead, but here's a replacement for that, you know? And I find that really interesting because her hair was originally like a brown, but the Persicom that he created to emulate her has blue hair. She has blue hair and she doesn't wear glasses, but she has the same face as his sister. And it's also fascinating that she's the only one who is appropriately clothed.
Exactly.
So she has a maid outfit, but it's fully clothed. It's like her arms are covered, her chest is covered. It's a reasonable length. She has like stockings on. So it's a really, really cute outfit and very appropriate. Whereas all the other Persicoms he has, they're more sexualized. They're in the more like the sex kitten bunny type of maid outfit, and like the boobs are out, obviously like the nips are covered, but it's a very more of a sexual nature. Even though he's a kid, he has them dressed this way, but I think he just does it to be like, they're just robots, I have no attraction to them. I like, he made them and he obviously clothed them, but there's none of that. I see them, they're just a tool for me. But his closest Persicom, who looks like his sister, you can tell she gets different treatment because he dressed her modestly. Just the way he cares for her and interacts with her is very fascinating. This show about his psyche, like he's a child prodigy, he's living on his own, and he, at least from what I've heard before, like especially kids who have like the higher IQ, and or if you have a higher IQ in general, it's more difficult to form connections with other people because you just simply see the world differently.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, for sure. There are psychological studies that question whether or not, if the more intelligent you are, is it harder for you to be happy? Are you more likely to develop depression than other people are? And they're trying to lend some credence to the age-old adage that ignorance is bliss, because when you are ignorant of things, it is you have less to worry about, less concerns and more appreciation for what you have in the here and now. But in terms of someone who's a prodigy, their mind is constantly going. And there are very few people who can keep up or relate to that speed or see things from the same perspective. And so you are constantly being misunderstood, constantly being undervalued because, people don't see the world the way you do. So it's harder to make those connections. And that's what most people want, is to be understood, to be genuinely cared for, and to have someone that they can connect with, whether it's on a superficial level or a deeper level. So I can completely understand how a prodigy would have a hard time building human connections. And I can understand how a person com or an android would be the ideal company, because you can manufacture them to match your intellect, or manufacture them to be that replacement to human connection, because it's the closest you'll ever get.
Exactly. And also like the idea of like playing off of when you say like ignorance is bliss, just even in our normal every day-to-day life, it's like the more in a bubble you are, it's like a more safer and comforting thing where you can just focus on being happy, focus on your life and what you got to do and what's going on in your own little area. And you can be a lot more safer and happier there. But the moment you start your self-awareness journey, the moment you start researching about like history or politics that are going on in the day-to-day world, once you start actually realizing what's happening outside of your bubble, it's like one of two things can happen. Either you become awake and you suddenly like, wow, the world isn't all unicorns and rainbows, and you're like, well, I have to do something. Or it's like, oh crap, I learned about this, so now I have to make a decision whether or not to be ignorant and just ignore it or actually do something. So it's like taking that responsibility to be aware of your surroundings. And it's a very tough burden. Like many people, I think that's also why a lot of people tend to stay ignorant. And like in terms of like the things that are going on in our society today, it's like people don't want to admit that they're wrong or that they were ignorant, because that's a lot of responsibility to undo. It's like when you look back at things you did in your past and you actively cringe, like, I can't believe I said that. And it just makes you feel like, well, I was a shit person. I hope I'm better now, it's taking that ownership and that responsibility, which many people just don't, like, they're too afraid to do it. And they prefer to stay ignorant because it's safer, it's more comfortable, and they don't have to face potentially looking at their mistakes and the stumbles that they had. And being a very smart intellectual, you see the problems in the world, you see what's behind the veils that people are holding over their faces, you see the bullshit. Like you are no longer fazed by it, you are no longer tricked by it, you know how the game is played. So from looking at that standpoint and knowing how the game is played, sometimes I think it will give you like just a different perspective of life. And it's really hard to balance trying to maintain a positive attitude once you know all the crap that's actually going down. You're like, well, none of this means anything. Like all the things that we do every day are just social constructs. Like the idea of money, the idea of you have to go to school, get a good job, work and make all this money and then retire and just work a 9 to 5, like all of these social constructs that were just drilled into us, they actually mean nothing. And once like we break out of that cycle, you're like, well, why doesn't anyone else see this? But it's become so drilled into us that people don't want to see that there's anything else. That's why when there's a lot of us who like, I don't want to fit that pattern, I don't want to work a 9 to 5, I don't want to have to suffer and be miserable for 40 years and like listening to somebody who I hate, like I don't want to do that. I want to start my own business. I want to travel. I want to do this. That's why people like that are met with so much resistance from their peers. Like, you can't do that. You'll never make it. Oh, that's too risky. Oh, that's too that. Because going outside of that box is just so unheard of and so unknown and so unsafe and doesn't fit that norm and that comfort bubble that people can't imagine why someone would want to leave this bubble. So I think this show definitely, when you dive deep into this and then like the other ones that we mentioned, just going outside of the box and outside of your comfort zone is a way to live a more fulfilling life. It's crazy. It's people just think that anime are just cartoons. And in actuality, there are more. There are a heck of a lot more than just cartoons. They're animated, but it doesn't mean they're always for kids, because I've heard that a lot. I've heard that, oh, well, anime is just for kids. Anime is only cartoons. I'm not going to watch that. It's stupid. But when you actually sit down and you watch, and you not only watch for the storyline and the enjoyment, look for the alternative behind the scene things, like, okay, what's the psychological development of this character? Why are they doing these things? What can I learn from the show? Because there's so much that can be taught by just watching these shows, by just engaging in something different. And that's why we are able to go so deep into the meaning of these shows and the psychological stuff, and this is why we love it, because we can see that there's more than just, oh my gosh, it's like machines fighting each other. Oh my gosh. No, it's like there's more than that. It's more than just a little mouse like shooting someone with electricity. It's more than that, so we definitely recommend, like, if you're gonna give it a shot and you're open to it, I challenge you to take a look at one of the 3 anime that we talked about today: Ouran High School Host Club, InuYasha, and Chobits. Maybe save Chobits for the end. That's one that's not particularly child friendly, but InuYasha and InuYasha and Ouran are definitely really great choices, especially if you want to watch with kids. Ouran's great too. But those 3, I would definitely say take a look. More so InuYasha and Ouran for fits and giggles. But if you want a psychological challenge, definitely give Chobits a try. But yeah.
Exactly. I love it. And it's funny, just one more thing. I always think of the Chobits opening theme, where it's like,
yes,
yeah,
ooh, ooh, yeah, ooh, ooh, yeah, let me be with you.
It's so
Let
cute.
me be with you. Ooh, 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 yeah.
Adorable.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
How do I remember that?
I don't know how we do this, but it's stuck and I loved it and I kept it. But everyone, I'm going to end with a quote that I'd like for you all to take with you in your journeys through life and exploring your passions and growing with them. So I have here, in all of living, have much fun and laughter. Life is to be enjoyed, not just endured. And that's by Gordon B. Hinckley. So take that with you, friends. Enjoy your life. It's worth it.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Callie here. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. To continue listening to us, like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel. If you want some behind-the-scenes content, the links to our social media channels are in the description box below. Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Search Melanin_Muses. That's MELANIN_MUSES. See you guys next week.